Happy Tuesday, fam. Well, we have spent the last 5 weeks on the series called Stage Power, giving you practical ways to improve your verbal communication at home, at work, in ministry, or in business. And tonight we wrap up that series with an open floor Q&A. And I hope you bought some questions because I bought some answers. We'll be right back right after today's intro. You are excellence. Your mind is of excellence. Your visions are of excellence. Your unique superpower is nothing short of excellence. You amplify a voice of excellence. Your contribution to this world will be of excellence. You will achieve your highest goals and desires with excellence. Excellence in everything, every time. Hey family, I'm Linnita Hosten, and I'm excited about tonight's topic because I have not prepared a lot of content. I've simply come to be a resource tonight. If you've not yet met me, my name is Linnita Hosten, and I title myself an edutainer. That's a combination of taking education and entertainment and combining them together. Really passionate about teaching practical, everyday skills that help us become better individuals for those that we love and those that we lead. And I started this series called Stage Power specifically for those who wanted to improve on their verbal communication skills, whether that be at home and or at work in any capacity. You just want to get better at articulating your thoughts, at captivating someone's interest when you're speaking, and getting creative when you do have the microphone when you're in a room. And so that's why I titled the series Stage Power Series. We're ending tonight. And for the past 10 years, I've had the privilege of traveling the country and having some really cool opportunities to use my voice as a form of expression to inspire others. And I've been really challenged in improving my speech in particular, not just because of the work that I do, but just because I want it to be better. And so I'm excited for tonight. If you're watching live, you can go ahead and type in hashtag. If you watch it, let me know that you're here. But if you happen to catch the replay, you can type in hashtag replay. So I'm going to start with you. What questions do you have? What you got? Nothing is too personal. Nothing is too deep. I welcome your curiosity. I welcome your challenge too. And I am literally putting myself on the hot seat for about 25 minutes. So make it good. Make it real good. And while I wait for the questions to come in, I'll say this. When I was 22, I was working in, hey, Alika. When I was 22, I was working in a outreach department. And it was my responsibility to create somewhat of a very engaging campaign for middle school students. I did not think I was good enough. I didn't think I had a voice that people would listen to. I had a lot of insecurities around that. But that's simply how I got my start. So I did that role for 3 years, and that helped me to polish expressing my thoughts fluidly and doing so in a very entertaining way. And so people always ask me, well, how did you get started? I never saw myself as a speaker, or I didn't think that I had interest in this path, but it just kind of opened up doors in that way. So what questions do you have? Do you have an upcoming meeting? Do you have an upcoming engagement? Did someone invite you to share a few words for graduation season for seniors? Are you looking for a fun way? Do you lead a ministry group? Are you looking for a fun way to engage your audience? Ask away can ask anything about the beginning, about the middle of the journey, about how I get people to listen. No question is a silly question. I'll say that. No question is a silly question if you have them. And so while I wait, I'll tell you another story. When I was, so let me back up for a second. There are levels to oral communication. So I think that there are people who start off who are interested in using their voice. Usually they have a story that they want to share. And they're like, I want to get more polished in my ability to present my story. And so they are typically found in community-based groups like churches, community groups that have a specific topic like women's empowerment, overcoming domestic violence, those sorts of things. So you have that level. And then sometimes you have those who are inside of the church. We call them preachers or teachers of the gospel. And they have a way of organizing speech or communicating God's word. And then you would have what I would call someone who is working inside a school-based opportunity. So maybe they work in K through 12, maybe they work with teachers, maybe they are educational consultants, so they speak and they train. That could be in a local level. Then you have someone who takes a local platform and they gain notoriety and they become what we would call national. National just means the moment you step foot outside of your state, you went from local to national. So these titles seem really daunting and big, but they are very simple. So you're outside of your state. The moment someone sees you overseas or they're hosting something overseas and they invite you overseas and you go and you speak in any capacity, then you become international. So you see how that is not, the title sounds really great, but the action of actually getting to that point isn't very hard. I mean, I haven't gotten to the international status, but how people use those titles, I just wanted to give you a little plug there. There's another part of the business in which you are represented. Someone has a Rolodex of potential clients and they hire you to go out and speak because you have the natural gifting to do so. And so I am represented by an agency. And one of the things that on my very first engagement in 2019, it was for 400 students on their Black Girls Rock event. And I had never done Alika, I see your question. I had never done a keynote for 60 minutes. Up until that point, I was what you would define as like a local, like church speaker. So I went from having to create 15 minutes of content to 60. And I had about a week and 7 days because I was actually the backup speaker. The original speaker was pregnant. She was in her 7th month. She declined. So I was brought in as an alternative. So you imagine having to create 15 minutes of content to 60 minutes. It was very daunting and I was very afraid. And I remember being so nervous. I was nervous before the day even came. Like I got about 7 days to prepare. I felt like I was nervous every day that week. And I got a chance to travel to the school. My dad traveled with me that time. And I remember when it was my time to go onto stage, they had a DJ at the event. And the DJ asked me, what do you want us to play before you go on stage? And at that time, I didn't have a song. I still don't. And I was like, I don't know, surprise me. That was not a good idea because he could have played something crazy, but he didn't. And I danced onto the stage and the crowd went crazy. It was the first time that I learned that you're responsible for creating the energy in the room. And that's a really big example because I was in front of 400 people. But if you're in front of 4 people or 10 people, you're responsible for creating the energy in the room. And I remember a woman wrote in one of my feedback, on my feedback survey, she wrote, I love that when I know you're coming in to speak, I don't have to hype up my audience to get them prepared for you. You do that for us. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, you should. That's part of the job. That's part of the job. And you don't have to be a professional to take on that title. And Alika, this brings us right to your question, which was, how do I attract high schoolers to my program? That's a good question. Actually, it's been quite a struggle. And I have actually retired my direct relationship with working with parents and their students because of this very reason. It was very challenging to do so on a B2C scale, meaning me as a business approaching consumers, front-facing consumers, which would be a parent or a leader of a community organization. So I no longer service students directly. So the only way you can get me to work with a student is if you are a part of an organization, you already have a host of students. You have a student body, you have an organized student group. You all have a meeting cadence, and then you're hiring me on behalf of the organization to work directly with the student population. And how do I get those opportunities are typically by referral. Some organizations catch me live like tonight. And the reason why I live stream weekly is to maintain visibility with prospective clients so that they could see what I have the potential to offer them. And I'm really intentional about the topics that I teach on because it's hoping to attract that client. So, to the short version to your question, when I initially started and I was working directly with parents to help their students, mainly social media, I did a 30-day social media challenge, meaning I went live on Facebook for 30 days straight. It was probably the most gruesome thing I ever have done. It was not easy, but that attracted people that I had never met before, including a woman in San Antonio, Texas, who worked directly with a school system, and she hired me to work with students in San Antonio virtually. This was in the pandemic. Never met her before. That came through social media. So if not through social media, it was direct referral. And then, so that's how I was working with high school students. So either someone would see me and would say, hey, can you come work with my child? Or social media content, engage them. And that is how we were able to work together. I always get this sour like, oh man, you don't do that anymore. Why? I was waiting for my child to get to the age to work with you. And what I will say is that I know I've connected with so many people who do similar work. Happy to give a referral, but that's no longer a service I provide. But that was a great question. I never formally came out and said on social media that I was pivoting, but I was hoping that the type of content that I started distributing would demonstrate that. And so I took away all of the language student and took away all of the language related to teen. And I started using words like those that you love and lead. And it's more vague until we kind of niche down and figure out whom our direct audience is going to be. But I'm definitely in the process of transitioning and pivoting from high schoolers. In some rare cases, there are some where people, where I get invitations to work with groups. Like this summer, I'll be working with Enoch Pratt Library in Baltimore. They have a summer program, and they've hired me to do some like consistent programming for the duration of their summer camp. That's distinctively different than working independently one-on-one with a student. And so those opportunities are still there. I just no longer work directly with students in a coaching capacity. Great question. I see we have more people who are live. If you're live and you're here, let me know that you're here. You can drop off hey in the comments. I'm watching. And if you came with a question tonight, I hope you came with a question because I came ready to share very honestly and eagerly as well. And so I am definitely staring down the comment section to make sure I don't miss anything. What questions do you have about the journey, about advice, about how did I do certain things? How did I get these things? Whatever you have, I am an open box. Hello, is it Laventris Newsom? Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you. I pray that I pronounced your name correctly. It's a beautiful name, by the way. And thank you for joining me live. I've never seen your name before. I keep a really close community. I try my best to monitor those who keep in touch, and I like to remember your name. So, thank you for stopping by. Let me know where you're watching from. Hi, Miss Denise. Excited that you're here. Again, I am taking questions from those who are watching. I didn't prepare any content today to share, but I came loaded and ready to answer any questions that you have. Overcoming nervousness, improving your verbal speech, how to eliminate ums and ahs. Why do you speak with pauses? Whatever question that you have, happy to answer it tonight. You got the floor. Pick my brain. Ask me anything. Hey, Alan from San Antonio. It's awesome. Thank you for joining tonight. Excited to have you. What questions do you have? So I'll pick back up on that story while I'm waiting for questions. While I was on that campus, it was at the University of Illinois, Urban Champaign, I think. And I did a keynote on them showing up courageously on their campus. They were attending a predominantly white institution, and these were 400 Black students. And I remember as I was speaking, now I'm on an elevated stage. We were in like an auditorium, and so they're seated. So naturally, when you have the opportunity to speak in front of people, if you're standing and they're sitting, you are all automatically asserting a level of authority. So the only way to change that dynamic, if you're trying to have more of a personal conversation, is to either sit down on the stage or to come off the stage and walk around with them. Well, I chose, and I've never seen anybody do this, I chose to kneel on the stage and speak to them from that way. And I remember getting really quiet because the tone, and when you're trying to convey something that's either very serious, something you really want to make a connection with, how you say it matters. And so I remember kneeling, and the photographer got a really great caption of that. But one of the things I learned from that instance is that the environment that you're in, while I couldn't manipulate the setting of an auditorium, I could manipulate my physical body to change like the voice that I was trying to communicate from. And so those are small changes that we can make to become better communicators. All right. Okay, great question. I love them. Keep them coming. Why do you pause? Okay, so pauses are meant to emphasize a point. So if you are listening to someone and they're speaking very fast, if you are listening to them, that means you're responsible for keeping up and processing everything that they're saying. But if they slow down and make points with their pauses, you as a listener are more likely to digest their point. So it's a dramatic way of emphasizing what you're trying to say. That's why people use pauses. And when you're developing your speech or when you're developing your communication skills, pauses are uncomfortable because we assume that silence is an indication that we are not good. We don't have our thoughts together. There shouldn't be silence, and that's actually not true. It's actually the reverse. When you're able to stand in front of a crowd of people and have silence, that's a very powerful way of conveying confidence. So sometimes silence, it's uncomfortable for the listener, but it will 10 out of 10 grab their attention. And so pauses are meant to emphasize a point in that dramatic moment where there's no one speaking. It's a great way to capture people's attention. And so that's why pauses are used. It's a great question. I don't use them a lot, not like I know some people do, but now that I've said that, you're gonna notice why those pauses are inserted when you're listening to other people speak or when you're speaking. Alan said, I saw a previous video in which you talked about working on your pronunciation of words and its importance. What did that work look like? Great question, Alan. It looked like literally what I talked about in that video. I told myself I wasn't going to break my speech. So we code switch, and not just when people don't look like us. Code switch meaning we change how we're speaking based on who we're speaking to. So if you're like my parents, when a bill collector calls or someone who has some level of influence or authority, their voice changes. Hi, how are you doing? Great to hear from you. And as soon as they hang up, they say, oh my goodness, so glad they got off my phone. So the emphasis on the language or the words that they're using when they're communicating, it changes. So if I could simplify code switching, it's basically when you, and not in the racial way, I deem code switching is when you change, putting an emphasis on the clarity of speech based on who you're talking to. So typically when we're talking to family and friends, we don't have an emphasis on clarity of speech because we know that they'll accept how we speak. So we're very relaxed. So what I chose to do is not to relax my speech. So instead of being very casual with my friends I decided to never break that. And I think I did it for maybe a month or two. It was really for me to gain an awareness about how I was using the muscles in my face and emphasizing my words so that I could speak better. Because before I did that, I couldn't. I had to think really hard about my INGs, about my word diction was not as sharp. And I wish I had video of that time because it's hard for people to even conceptualize that my speech was any different than it is today, but it was drastically different. So what that looked like was for 30 days, not breaking or turning into casual speech, but keeping the emphasis on my words. So no matter who I was talking to, mom, friend, sister, keeping that emphasis. And to be honest, it was uncomfortable. because it seemed like I was trying hard. It seemed like I was trying hard to do something in front of people who it didn't really matter if I could speak well or not. And that was not the point. The point was not to show the people that I was mostly connected to that I could. It was for me to show me that I could improve my speech regardless of who I was speaking to. So, Alan, that's a great question, and that was literally what I did. So I tried not to break my speech or change it or code switch for about 30 days. So that's like, Alan, that's like you speaking kind of slowly and uh, pronunciating every word for 30 days, even if you're talking to your 5-year-old child. Like trying that. That's essentially what I did. The other thing, my pastor at the time asked me to do the church's video announcements, and we had announcements every week. And that helped me to refine my speech too, because it was something I had to do. And I had to record voiceovers. They had to be maybe 15 to 30 seconds. And my words had to be clear. And then I had to say it fast because it wasn't a lot of time. That helped too. I did that for 8 years. And the last thing that I did, it was a part of my job. I never even mentioned this, but I used to work for DC's transit system. It's called Metro, and there is an audio announcement that goes on inside the stations. And part of my job at the time was to be that voice, and that helped refine my voice too. So I would say things like, "May I have your attention, please? Customers traveling on the orange, blue, yellow, and green line." Like I had to learn. My speech had to improve, or it by the nature of my work, it was improving too. So those are some of the ways. But thank you, and I appreciate you connecting from that video. A lot of you have joined my online community based on that video, and I love that the honesty has gotten you guys here and thinking about improving your verbal communication as well. Alika said, "How did you transition from a 15-minute to a 60-minute presentation? Is there a technique to extending content not to lose your audience?" Yes, this technique is golden. I'll try to give you a very quick masterclass. So when you are extending content, I look at it, and if you check last week's episode, we talked about this. But based on how much time you have is how you should divide it. So if you have 60 minutes, you know that your information should have an intro. You should have some main points, maybe some transitions. I call them commercial breaks. That's when you have jokes, demonstrations. That's when you pull up the audience. And then you have a closing. So based on how much time you have is how you should delegate the increments of time that you use. So when I have 60 minutes, I usually designate my intro 10 minutes. My closing is 10 minutes. So that's 20 minutes right there. So I have 40 minutes left. Those 3 points that I usually give, that usually takes about 30 minutes. And I know you're like, how? I'll give you that in a second. But 30 and 20, that's 50? And then I have about 10 minutes left. And so those transitions or commercial breaks are where I infuse those 10 minutes. So here's an example of a 10-minute introduction, because I know you're like, how do you make an introduction 10 minutes? After a person introduces you, you could do a call and response to the audience. You could have, if you have music, you can have the audience stand up. You could have them do a stretch. In my space, it's technically killing time, but with intention. So it's killing time with intention related to what you're teaching. So if you're about to do something related to a mind, you might do a mind exercise. You can also play videos. You could do demonstrations with the audience. When you're driving home your key points, you can break them up with demonstrations. You can infuse Q&A. And most people don't do this because you really have to control how long the Q&A portion goes. And if people ask you questions that may be uncomfortable, it's just very risky. But you could infuse, if after your key points, you could infuse Q&A, or you can infuse what we would call like open floor discussion. So you would break up the audience into groups and have them discuss for 10 minutes and then report back to you. So all of those things take up time. And so most speakers have some variation of what we call a lecture. And not, when I say most speakers, I'm not referring to like when you're in a very traditional environment that's structured, like a Sunday service. Like you can't break out people in a Sunday service. But when you're given autonomy over how you spend the time that you have with an audience, you can do those things. And you would ask the organizer on the front end, can I do this? But yeah, you can break them off into groups, have them report. You can have them do a competition together. And I always say commercial breaks are important, even if you only have 30 minutes, because it's important to think about how each person learns when you're presenting. So some people learn by seeing things repeatedly. So that may be on your slide deck. That may be a printout PDF. Some people learn by doing things. So them seeing it would not stimulate them. They have to touch it. They have to be a part of some type of physical exercise that emphasizes the point. And then some people learn by hearing things repeatedly. Well, powerful presenters infuse all three of those learning techniques. So they're thinking about auditory learners, those who learn by listening, visual learners, and learners who learn hands-on. And so a great way to do that is to get your audience to move, get them to see, write, discuss. So when you add all of those elements, they kill time. Kill time is probably not the best, but you know what I mean. They aid you in filling time. I like that. And that's how you get to 60 minutes, essentially, in a nutshell. And these are things, I love that you guys are asking these questions. These are things that I'm excited to package together and begin to teach, because it's a lot to definitely walk through in 30 minutes. But let me know if that answered your question. Hey, Deaconess Moses, thank you for joining live. If you have a question for tonight, definitely hop in and share. And a follow-up question was is there a technique to extending content without losing your audience? Yes, engagement. So that would be them standing up, you doing a relay race. I call them commercial breaks, where you are essentially, what you're directly sharing at that moment, you're taking a break from driving home a point to do a supplemental activity that ties back to what you are teaching, but it doesn't make a direct correlation without you verbalizing that. So I guess an example of that would be, let's say you were doing a lecture at a beauty school and you were teaching about the importance of knowing chemicals and how color transitions and why you shouldn't do this. A commercial break might be, you might do a relay race for the person who could do, like, I don't know, I'm gonna keep it really simple. They could do like an egg on spoon thing, and you do a relay race, and when they finish, you may tell the audience, or you'll thank the winner and you acknowledge them for participating. You would tell the audience, in this business, everything is not a race. Sometimes we assume that moving fast gets us more clients. We assume that moving fast gets us more, but actually moving fast enables us to make more mistakes. So you see how them doing an egg spoon thing didn't initially make a correlation, but you helped to make one. That's an example of not losing your audience and keeping them engaged by having what we call a commercial break. Let me know if that resonates with you or if that was clear. Okay, I love these questions. I'm so excited about tonight. I've never done this before, and I love it. Okay. How much does your speech weigh in on interviews and obtaining employment? To what percentage? This is a really good question. I don't have the percentages to prove this, but I will say, if in business people buy from who they like, know, and trust, like it's known study in business that when you are having a business arrangement or you're considering buying from somebody, you typically go for the person you like, something about them, their friendliness, their demeanor, their energy. You trust them because they seem very competent. They're able to maybe communicate in a very trustworthy way. They know what they're talking about. Essentially, it's easy to buy from them. If it's like that in business, I would make a very strong assumption that it would be like that in the work environment too. Meaning, if you're on the other side of a decision maker and you're able to convey or answer questions or participate in an interview and you come across as friendly, easy to work with, very knowledgeable, I'm going to make a very strong assumption that it would make you a more favorable candidate than someone who may struggle with articulating their thoughts and or presenting themselves in a way that may be friendly or easy to work with. So I think that the skill, I have no research on this, but I think that the skill does translate into favor when interviewing. On the flip side of that, for those who may not feel as strong in interviewing, maybe nervousness, maybe it's just not your thing, what I would suggest is that you find ways to supplement the areas that you're not good in. How can you justify and prove that your skill set, your demeanor, your ability to work with others can be done if you know articulating it is not your strength? And one way to do that is to devise a portfolio. I have a whole YouTube video on this, how to create a portfolio for strong candidacy. But if you're not good at communicating it, maybe in your portfolio, you may have letters from past colleagues or past projects, people writing about how easy it was to work with you, what they enjoyed about working with you. And sometimes we already get these kinds of compliments in emails. So it's just a matter of taking a screenshot of them, printing them, and putting them into a portfolio. Again, I have a whole YouTube page on this. Not page. I have a whole YouTube video on what to put in a portfolio, how to compile it, how to organize it. It's on YouTube. It's about 30 minutes. But if verbal communication is not your strength, don't leave money on the table because you may not be proficient in that area yet. Find a way to demonstrate that tangibly, and that would be by way of a portfolio. So that would definitely be my suggestion. You cannot, most people aren't doing that, by the way, so it's a great differentiator to say you'll go the extra mile. But it's definitely something tangible to say if you weren't as fluid in your thoughts during an interview process. Okay. Tiara said, this $1 million training on a Tuesday. Wow. Yes. I'm literally just sharing everything that I can possibly share. So y'all got some good questions. Bring them. Bring the heat to the kitchen. I'm already sweating underneath this shirt. Okay. What was the cause of the greatest growth for you as a speaker? You know what? This is a great question. I'm gonna give you a very honest answer. It was proving to people who doubted that I could do it, that I could do it well. I could do it just enough to say that I did it, but I didn't want that. I wanted to do it well where people had to be recognized. And what I mean by that was when I started working with an agency, I would be sent to events and rooms of people that I would have never gotten to on my own. And 97% of the time, these are rooms of people who were visibly older than me, and they were not Black or a minority in general. And I know that I look young. So imagine me less than 5 years from now, I look younger. And when I would enter a room before the organizer would acknowledge me, people wouldn't even make eye contact. So yeah, I'm traveling the country. I'm getting flown in and staying in a hotel to do a 60-minute keynote for a couple $1,000s. And me walking into a room was not being acknowledged. It was almost like, where's the speaker? And I remember one time before I got up to speak, after I was introduced, most people weren't listening. They weren't listening for maybe about, it's almost like I had to earn their ear, and I loved it. So I was determined what made me a greater speaker was being in those kinds of environments, and each time seeing a move of energy. People go from sitting like, let's see, I can't imagine she has something that would even interest me. Like that is literally what their energy would be conveying to them, literally sitting at the edge of their seats. I've seen it happen too many times. So now it doesn't move me as much because I know their disposition will change. But in the beginning, it was my driving force. How can I make my anecdotes or stories more engaging? How can I reel them in? And it wasn't about being funny. It wasn't about appearing overly smart. It was really pulling at their heartstrings. That's usually my method of engagement. It's getting to people where it matters to them, not making them laugh because I don't think I'm that funny. But that's definitely has been the greatest source of my strength, having to like, you know what? It's going to be a line when I finish because people don't want to connect. And that's typically what happens. There is typically a line. And I usually stay and wait and talk to every person, even the one who may have written me off in the beginning. Okay, Chanel, I see this is a long one. I hope the whole thing appears. Any advice on learning to better my communication? Sometimes I have so much to say and or ask, but I seem to freeze up or get nervous most of the time. I work for a transit agency. Okay, so we share that in common. I want to become an instructor from the day I started. However, I still feel 9 years later that I'm not quite ready. I've been thinking of going back to school for communication, but not sure that's the right move or even necessary. Hey, Chanel. I know exactly what you mean. I also worked in a transit agency, and the day that I joined, I also wanted to be an instructor. I do not think you have to go back to school to learn communications, but what I do think you have to do is develop your muscle of confidence in getting in front of people. I'm currently listening to Eric Thomas's new book called, I can't even remember, but he said, I still get nervous. E.T., the hip hop preacher. Beyonce said she still gets nervous in her documentary. I still get nervous 10 years later, and I'm nowhere near them. Nervousness is a very natural response. It's the body's natural response to wanting to do a good job. It's a heightened sense of awareness that pressure is on. And so I would put the focus on learning to subside my nervousness and increasing the chances of me practicing doing the skill or doing the training. So one way you could do that, I always say, if there's an opportunity for you to volunteer in your community or in your current role to do instructor-like things like getting in front of people to present, it could be speaking up at staff meetings, it could be asking to lead the meeting or to organize it, but it's the practice of those skills over time that compound, that develop that muscle. So a lot of people are hired for roles that they're not quite proficient to do yet. So you not feeling comfortable in that role now is not an indication that you're not, I wouldn't say ready, but eligible to do it. I think that nervousness that you have is normal. Now the question is, what are you doing about it? And one of the best ways to subside nervousness, I think, and this is for anybody watching today, whether you want to improve that for work or in your personal life or for business, and that is to think about who you're speaking in front of and how they feel. That's the easiest way to take the nervousness off of you. Some people do it in a comedic way. They tell a joke. Some people do things like they bring candy, they bring like hand things, they play activities on the front end, they do some type of movement in the beginning. If you ever see a person come onto stage and they're like, they're telling jokes and you're like, get to the point, that's them trying to control or get their nerves to calm down. And so I always say, what can you do when you're in front of people and you're nervous to put yourself in their shoes, make jokes about how they feel, or to bring awareness to how they may be feeling, is one way. And the second way is to get prepared. I've only winged one engagement that I've done. And when I say wing, I mean show up with nothing prepared to say. Just, I'm going to speak from the heart. I did it one time. It was disastrous. The level, I promise you, I probably should have passed out from the pace that my heart was beating. It was beating so fast, I felt like people in the audience could see the heart in my chest. I was so nervous, I couldn't even tell you what I said. And it was because I was unprepared. If you know anything about the human body, it's either fight or flight. When you're nervous, and I wanted to ask you guys this, I wonder which one do you think shows up, fight or flight? Typically, it's like flight, leave, run, forget it, don't do it anymore. It's hard to fight through those thoughts. It's hard to be rational, objective, fluid in your thoughts. Your mind is not wired to do that. And so when you have prepared something, you've thought it through, you've written it down, you've meditated on it, you've verbally said it aloud repeatedly. When you are nervous, you have something stored in your subconscious, hopefully, something in your subconscious that you can say. So another way to combat nervousness or anxiety of nervousness is to prepare. Prepare. And it doesn't have to be word for word. Maybe you have bullet points. Maybe you write down something on your finger. Some people use their hand to write notes. But you got to have something. So preparation and thinking of the audience first and not you. But nervousness is natural. And if someone is not nervous, they are very arrogant. They're basically saying like, what I got to say is good enough. Saying however it comes out that way. So it's natural, not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. And good luck too. I'm gonna be praying about that. Shanta. Hey, Shanta. Shanta says, good eye contact, pausing before speaking, confidence sets the tone. Yes, it does. In addition to, and I hate that this is even a thing, but before, 93% of what we communicate is nonverbal. And notice that you said these two things, good eye contact and pausing, is displaying confidence. Before a person decides that they're going to listen to you, they're evaluating if you're even credible. A lot of that has to do with our presentation, and it has a lot to do with what our body is doing when we're speaking. And so I know sometimes when we're nervous, it's hard to even have a consciousness about what the body is doing. So some people are leaning on things, arms folded, fidgeting, tossing from side to side in their shoe, like shifting, walking back and forth fast. They're not even aware of that. So not only what you're saying is important, but what your body is doing is important too. And that takes practice. That's just too much for us to talk through tonight. But yes, I second that, Shantae. Wally said, wow, that's good. I don't know what it was, Wally, but I'm glad that you thought it was good. And this discussion tonight has been good too. Oh my gosh, it's 9:15. And absolutely welcome. I was excited and more excited to do this than you all probably can think of. Let's see, did I miss anything? Oh, that's good. In those particular rooms, did you ever question your appearance? Woo! And I believe Alika is referring to when I shared when I was being hired to go into rooms of people that didn't look like me and they were older than me. I've always been in rooms like that my whole life. Even in the places that I've worked, I was typically the youngest on staff. So I have learned to adapt to appear to look older. And I had to unlearn that actually when I first began speaking. My headshots, I had a blazer and a button up. It was like I was trying to prove that I was good enough and that I had enough knowledge to share that someone would take me serious. And so I'll say I had a heightened awareness about my appearance at a very young age. And so I didn't question it. But I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, I could give 2 pennies about someone's perception. There's a level of certainty that I feel about how God has made me. And the presentation of that, whether it's received or not, I know is God's best. So I don't feel that way anymore, which is why when I locked my hair, before it was long enough to style, it was short. So it looked like little worms. And I still had to go and speak. I wore a wig for the very beginning parts. I wore a wig for maybe like almost a year while my hair grew at least right here. And I didn't want to wear it anymore. I felt like I was hiding. So before my locks were fully formed, I stopped wearing the wig and I still was in front of lots of audiences. I didn't feel as spunky or as pretty as I would normally feel. I didn't. I will acknowledge that. But I didn't feel like I wanted to change it either. It was just me embracing that was the stage that my hair was in. But I'll tell you what I do have an awareness about is showing up very polished. And if you notice, whenever I am live, if you've ever seen me in person, I look like this. So how you see me online is what I look like in real life. And that's very intentional. I think that there's a level of prestige that comes with someone who presents themselves in a polished way. And for the kinds of audiences that I'm in front of, I think that's most appropriate. So it doesn't look like I'm not in a blazer, I'm not in a suit with pantyhose, but I will have on makeup. I will have on likely, I won't have on a crop top and a mini skirt, but I might have on like, a little midi and a pencil skirt with a little kneecap out. But yes, to answer your question, those are things that I have always had a level of awareness about. Shanta, your comments are so funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, I will share some of these. LaQuinta says, yes, speak with her hands, and I hate it. That's not a bad thing if your hands are not distracting. So speaking with your hands are okay. So what I would suggest that you would do is the next time that you have to speak in front of someone, have someone record it just for you and watch it on mute and see what your hands are doing. So if you feel like they're moving too much, then you know your hands are distracting. But if you feel like they're complimenting what you're saying, which is what they should be doing, then don't change that. Hands are not a bad thing, because what we don't want is your hands to be by your side and you looking like major pain. So that's not a bad thing, but you do want to monitor the movement of your hands. Great observation. Alan said, have you always had the ability to think quick on your feet? No, I was about to curse. No, absolutely not. We're throwing these questions at you, and you are able to respond and elaborate without hesitation. This is a really good example of what I'm about to say. I've been going live consistently since 2019. Remember, I talked about your muscle. I don't want to bore you with this, but if you were to go back to my live videos in 2019, you would see that I was not as quick on my feet. What you're seeing today is a result of me doing something repeatedly. So it's a muscle now that's been cultivated for the past 4 years. And that's when I say things like, you can improve too, or your verbal communication has the same ability to grow. This is a really good example of that. My thoughts were not as fluid. I wasn't always quick on my toes. But when you do something over and over and over, I go live. Sometimes there's no one watching my episode. 0 people aren't here. No comments are there. And I'm still live for 30 minutes. So it's a muscle that I've been building. And so it's not a magic power. It's not a magic power. It's just over time, putting in the reps. Still shooting in the gym. That's a good question, Alan. When your message is clear, it works. Yes, it does. Brevity, being brief, very succinct in your thoughts, and getting to your point with less words is the most effective way to communicate. The most effective way to communicate. Malika says, that's true. You do look the same in person. Very polished. I try to. I don't want to run into one of y'all and y'all be like, is that? You don't look like them pictures you be posting. I don't want to be that person because I be meeting those people all the time. Okay, Chanel. Chanel said, loved your response. Thank you. And thank you in advance for your prayer. I'm about to put that in my prayer jar so I don't forget. This is my prayer jar right here. Because I actually practice what I preach. I don't just be saying stuff to just be saying it. I would take a lot of advice. What you said, I've been knowing I need to do. Yes, just haven't done so. Confirmation at its best. Hallelujah. Can you let me know the name of E.T.'s new book? And so glad I came across your page. Thanks again for being here, open to us. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I am a living example of what it looks like for God to use you. The E.T.'s book is called You. And I'm going to put what I just shared with you in my prayer jar. And I'm going to write your name on it too. Chanel Ticket Training Instructor Role. And then on the back, I write the date, which is 5/30. See? It is going inside my prayer jar. Count it done. Count it done. Okay. We're almost here for a live. Let's see. Yes, Dr. Monica, keep doing something repeatedly to build fluidity. Yep. And it seems redundant. It does. It's very redundant, but that's the only way you get polished. And if you are familiar with any speaker that you admire, Lisa Nichols, Les Brown, even Eric Thomas, their message is something that they've been saying for years. So sometimes we look at those people and we say, man, they must be a natural. You would be too if you were saying that same message just refined for over 20 years. You would be a force to be reckoned with. And so, yeah, that you doing it repeatedly will help with fluidity for sure. You're absolutely welcome. Laventrice, you're absolutely welcome. And thank you for joining tonight. I'm so glad for a lot of the new connections that you guys are here. Dr. Monica said, that's me going live on Monday night and only one or two showing up. I'm going to keep showing up. Yes, because you guys are here tonight. To be honest, this is the most I've ever had engaged live in the past however so years. It's a result of having consistent content. So yes, Dr. Monica, keep going. Keep going. I want to wrap up tonight by reminding you there are 3 ways we can work together. You can bring me in to speak. You can bring me in to train on a particular topic. This month, we were talking about verbal communication. So if you lead a frontline team, customer service related or consumer related, and you want to train them on increasing their communication skills when interacting with front lines, that's something that we can do. And my favorite way to work together is to partner. And that typically looks like you have an initiative for a period of time. You would like ongoing support for your staff or for the people that you are working closely with. And we can customize what that looks like. So those are some ways we can work together. The final way, and it's coming. I don't have it tonight, but it's coming. I want you to keep tuned. We are going to have a Stage Power Intensive in person. It's going to be in Hanover, Maryland, and it's going to happen in August. But more information about those details will come out early in the month of June. And I'll say this, I'm going to share it on this platform first, and I also will be giving away 2 tickets for those persons to attend. So what we've been talking about in the Stage Power series, we're actually going to do those exercises live and in person. And again, that information will be coming out next week with more details. And I want you to stay connected because you might get a free seat. You might get a free seat. So listen, family, that's all I have for you tonight. And I enjoyed you. Thank you so much. Shanta, so well spoken, and I enjoyed your share. Thank you. You're absolutely welcome. I'm giving you virtual hugs from Baltimore, Maryland, which is where I am. And you're absolutely welcome for the insight. Thank you also, Alan, for joining tonight. I appreciate you. I hope that you guys will come back next Tuesday, and so we can continue to grow and learn together. And if I did not get to your question, or you had a question you didn't get a chance to answer, shoot me an email, info@linnitahosten.com, or you can shoot a DM as well. I would love for you to get that question answered. Yes, Alika, I would hope to see you there. I cannot wait. I'm excited about that. It'll actually be the first time that I'll be doing in-person training, working directly with those who want to master their skill of verbal communication. All right, family, I'm out. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I love you like a fat kid loves cake. I'll see you next Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. You are excellent. Your mind is of excellence. Your visions are of excellence. Your unique superpower is nothing short of excellence. You amplify a voice of excellence. Your contribution to this world will be of excellence. You will achieve your highest goals and desires with excellence. Excellence in every